July 1947, Roswell, New Mexico. Wreckage found in the desert outside this small town is believed by many to be a UFO.
The question is, are UFOs real? The answer is yes.
For years, controversy has grown about what really happened here that summer night. Now, a decorated ex-U.S. Army intelligence officer has made a remarkable claim. He says that not only are UFOs real, but that the U.S. military harvested advanced technology from them. He knows this, he says, because he held the technology in his hands and saw alien bodies from the Roswell crash.
The humanoid-type body came from the Roswell area where there was a crash in 1947.
Why should we believe him? Because of the man that he was, the years of service that he dedicated to the United States of America, and the fact that he was considered one of the top military men in his field.
Who is this person? What did he do in the past? What were the things that he has said in the past that have come to fruition?
According to Lieutenant Colonel Philip Corso, he was responsible for bringing alien technology to military labs and civilian scientists. And they used it to make lasers, fiber optics, integrated circuits, night vision image goggles, and bulletproof vests.
We are looking at crashed flying saucers, or ones that are shot down, and we're trying to figure out how they work.
Others are skeptical that alien technology jump-started the military-industrial complex.
That's a peculiar kind of lack of self-confidence in human ingenuity.
I found that Philip Corso wasn't telling the whole truth about a number of things.
Is Philip Corso's story the fantasy of one ambitious intelligence officer? Or does he confirm that a UFO did crash at Roswell in 1947, and that it launched a secret military program to push alien technology into mainstream development? Summer 1947. Major Philip J. Corso is on patrol at the Army base at Fort Riley, Kansas, when he encounters something that will challenge everything he knows about heaven and earth. Corso was a career military man, a respected intelligence officer, and an artillery commander with his finger on the nuclear button. But inside a crate in a deserted building, Corso swore was a being from another planet. Corso would publish an account of this and other revelations in a book called The Day After Roswell, a New York Times bestseller when it came out in 1997.
In one of his book signings, 5 colonels came to him and verified that my father was right on with everything that was written in the book.
Corso died in 1998. But the material he presented in his book is still controversial. Now, for the first time, the full story of his military career and his startling UFO allegations are being told on television. 1942, the year after the Pearl Harbor attack. Philip Corso, a small-town boy from Pennsylvania, is drafted into the Army. During World War II, he trains as an intelligence officer, and afterward, at the age of only 29, Corso becomes a spy hunter in Rome. His mission, to seek out and terminate Soviet agents.
When the United States Army occupied Rome, what they wanted to do was make sure that the post-war government would be a friendly government, not a communist government.
A position with a lot of authority behind it. The man was regarded as an up-and-comer.
By April of 1947, Corso returns to the United States for additional training at the U.S. Army's intelligence school at Fort Riley. 3 months later, in July 1947, comes that fateful night when he claims he has the encounter that shakes him to his core. 32-year-old Corso is the post-duty officer, an assignment that puts him in charge of security at the base. That evening, Fort Riley is buzzing with rumors. 5 trucks containing debris from a mysterious aircraft accident in Roswell, New Mexico, have arrived at the base in Kansas. Corso, with his training as an intelligence officer, is intrigued by the shipment. At about 11 p.m., Corso says he enters the building where the Roswell shipment is stored. A guard on duty tells Corso that he has already looked into one of the crates making up the shipment and cannot comprehend what he's just seen. Corso then says he has a look for himself.
And he sees these, they look like coffins. They're little, they're like kid coffins. Can't figure out what that is. So he goes and he picks up the tarp.
It looked like a thin body, and a humanoid was a sort of a big head on it, and eyes, but not too long, and not the shape of it was not as wide, as I say, as our bodies are.
Corso says this was his first encounter with extraterrestrials, but it would not be his last, nor his most significant. Later, he would be given top-secret files and alien artifacts that, he claims, would generate a new technological world order. But in 1947, that day was still a decade away. The outbreak of the Korean War in 1950 puts a hold on Philip Corso's ruminations on extraterrestrial beings. Corso joins General Douglas MacArthur's staff as an artillery targeting specialist for UN forces. After the 1953 armistice, he remains in Asia, serving as an intelligence officer, repatriating American and Allied prisoners of war.
I came to know Phil Corso because he had been a special projects officer in the Far East Command for prisoners of war under MacArthur, and then later held the same role and capacity for the National Security Council as a staffer in the Eisenhower White House.
According to his military records, in July of 1953, Corso is promoted to the rank of lieutenant colonel. He says he is a trusted advisor to President Dwight D. Eisenhower, informing him of what Corso asserts is rampant KGB infiltration within the CIA.
And Corso was screaming about this in the National Security Council to Eisenhower.
Corso states that Eisenhower rewards him with his own combat command. In 1957, military records confirm Corso is placed in charge of an artillery battalion at Red Canyon Missile Range. By October of that year, Corso commands the battalion in West Germany, where he develops new targeting strategies for nuclear strikes.
He's shown he can do the one thing, he'll follow orders, but he's shown initiative.
He had sole command of a nuclear weapons battery. Now, in the event that war would have broken out with the Soviet Union in the 50s, when Corso was in Germany, he would have had sole authority to release his nuclear weapons.
But after Corso returns from Germany, his career dramatically changes direction. The gifted intelligence officer, fearless spy hunter, and artillery commander who controlled the world's most powerful weapon now becomes a reservist in the National Guard. In October of 1960, Corso is virtually in retirement, a part-time unit advisor to a National Guard base in Maryland.
You could say it meant that some people were displeased with him, but it's just as easy to say he didn't have what it takes.
But Corso's supporters believe Corso is being groomed for his most important and most secret assignment.
Now there is a big green hand running his career. That big green hand is the hand of Arthur Trudeau.
Philip Corso has a powerful mentor in Lieutenant General Arthur Trudeau. A West Point graduate, class of 1924, Trudeau quickly gains a reputation as a forward-thinking officer, comfortable with high technology. In the Cold War era, he pioneers technological training for intelligence officers, and by 1958 is named Director of Army Research and Development.
When Trudeau gets a chance to appoint a deputy, he brings Corso over, and thus begins Corso's stint in Army R&D.
General called me and said, "Don, established Foreign Technology Division, and you're the chief of it. And you got an office down next floor under me."
Through this point in his career, Corso's Army job history is easily verified by examining military records.
Look, he did work in the Pentagon. His office was there. I have the roster. And he worked for General Trudeau, and he certainly knew him well. There's no question about that.
But after his Pentagon appointment, the paper trail of his career is harder to follow, and his assertions more difficult to confirm. Corso wrote that his Pentagon job entailed analyzing foreign military hardware, such as helicopter armament developed by the French, or the British military's vertical takeoff and landing fighter. Then the technology would be reverse engineered.
The military has had, over the years, a number of projects where enemy technological devices have been recovered by American forces.
So one of Corso's jobs was to get this foreign technology, this French technology, and reverse engineer it.
And then if they had something good, fed into our own technological timeline.
Reverse engineering plays a significant role in the spycraft of the Cold War era. The Soviets used captured American Sabre jets to reverse engineer U.S. technology, and the U.S. captured Soviet MiGs to reverse engineer Soviet technology. But if Corso's routine job involves examining technology from abroad, his task would soon change. Sometime after July 20th, 1961, Corso claims that General Trudeau calls him into his office and gives him an astounding directive. Examine technology captured from the 1947 alien spaceship crash in Roswell, New Mexico. Trudeau has a filing cabinet delivered to Corso's Pentagon office. Inside, Corso says, is proof positive of aliens visiting Earth and alien technology that Corso insists he will use to change the world. In 1947, Philip Corso claimed to have seen alien bodies from the infamous UFO crash near Roswell, New Mexico. Corso's description is consistent with those who claim to be eyewitnesses to the crash. The aliens, according to these witnesses, were 4 small human-like beings with 4-fingered hands, thin legs and feet, an oversized head, and large almond-shaped eyes. These descriptions purportedly appear in these classified documents prepared by government investigators. To this day, the documents have not been authenticated. Corso insists that he told no one about what he saw at Fort Riley. But in the summer of 1961, the 46-year-old lieutenant colonel is assigned to a Pentagon project that will force him to recall his eerie experiences.
He was assigned to the Army's research development at the Pentagon. Once again, a position with a lot of authority.
His goal? To advance U.S. military superiority by a factor of decades.
We had enough sense to push it. We had the organization, and we had the money, and we had the brains to do it, and we did it.
During the Cold War era, Corso says, there was great government concern that the Russians would gain access to the alien materials. Or worse, the aliens would use their superior technology to invade Earth. According to Corso, an ordinary filing cabinet contains the extraordinary artifacts of the Roswell crash. A piece of super strong metallic cloth. Corso contends it may have protected the alien pilots in their spacecraft. A tube that appears to shoot a searing red light. Corso thinks it might be a surgical instrument or a weapon. An alien-made headband that, according to his military reports, might have been used to transmit thoughts or control the alien craft. An imprinted set of miniaturized circuits, perhaps a prefabricated microcircuit. A flexible wire that might have transmitted light through its interior. And a lens that could allow anyone to see in the dark, supposedly taken from the eye of an alien being. To better understand the puzzling contents of the filing cabinet, Corso claims to immerse himself in classified government documents reporting on alien technology supposedly found at Roswell. According to the reports that Corso claims to have read, some of the world's foremost scientists, men like Wernher von Braun and J. Robert Oppenheimer, have access to the Roswell crash site. Corso says that Lieutenant General Trudeau greenlights him to assemble his own A-list team.
You will put on that team anybody that you want. Engineers, scientists, and even I told the Germans. Told them I'll take a couple of Germans too, in addition to the U.S. scientists.
Corso claims that based upon his close readings of the Roswell reports, he developed his own theories about how the alien craft may have functioned.
What Corso said was that the spacecraft had a way to jump. It didn't fly from wherever it came from to here. It jumped. And he said that's all they knew, that there was a wave around the spacecraft that allowed it somehow not to be a spacecraft, but a time machine. And the reason is that to travel the kinds of vast distances it had to travel, it had to leave what we understand in physics as a space-time continuum, drop out of that, and suddenly reappear in a new spot.
In Corso's personal notes are sketches detailing his concepts. Corso speculates that the alien craft is navigated by a mind control interface fitting the alien cranium.
It seemed as though by revolving the headband around the alien brain drawings, you would match up the pickups on the headband with various parts of the alien brain.
His background research complete, Corso maintains he is ready to move on to the next phase, distribution. He will hand off the alien technology he says comes from Roswell to appropriate defense contractors for development.
Try to imagine what would happen if a spaceship crashed on Earth and there was a fabulous piece of technology and somebody like Corso pulled it out and gave it to research labs and said, here guys, figure out how this works.
The result, Corso maintains, will lead to a complete reconfiguring of the world's most advanced technologies. In the early 1960s, America's military might is directed toward fighting the Cold War. Lieutenant Colonel Philip Corso wants to bring alien technology from Roswell into the fray. By the end of the summer of 1961, he maintains that he begins to contact military weapons labs about his alien artifacts.
Now, the Army laboratories also had civilian scientists there, And they developed this relationship of handling classified material. Phil Corso felt very comfortable working through the Army laboratories to the civilian scientists because the clearances were all taken care of by the laboratory.
America is dotted with top-secret high-tech labs where civilian scientists work on sensitive military projects. Los Alamos, home of the Manhattan Project, is perhaps the most famous. But in 1961, Fort Belvoir in Virginia is quietly working on a decade-long project to develop night vision engineering. Corso claims he makes this lab the first he approaches with alien technology.
In order to get these things reverse engineered properly, you couldn't just take this to a Radio Shack. I mean, it had to go to a place where somebody would understand the technology.
According to Corso, Roswell eyewitnesses report that the alien craft has image-intensifying technology. If one went inside the ship and looked out, the world outside would look as bright as day, even at night. There is also, according to Corso, a lens taken out of an alien's eye that has light-enhancing properties. No one knows how the two are related, says Corso, but he knows their potential value. Corso maintains that by the late summer of 1961, he helps researchers at Fort Belvoir by showing them the alien light-enhancing lens and possibly other light-enhancing technology from the Roswell craft.
This was a kind of technology that, although we think we have a very clear line of development going back to the Second World War, we take a look at how this technology has literally geometrically exploded over the years. Now, can this be attributed to this technology that was picked up at Roswell, according to Corso? Well, according to him, it can be.
Corso says he wasn't able to further develop the alien mind control interface. His theory was that it would only function with an alien brain. But this momentary setback, he claims, didn't forestall development of another Roswell artifact, an imprinted circuit of mysterious design.
We also had a little charred chip. Small thing, maybe 3/8 of an inch square, 2 threads coming out, and a little window in the center with thin wires. These came from Roswell. We didn't know exactly the function of the integrated circuits, but we suspected that these were circuits, electrical circuits.
Corso asserts that he brings the object to Bell Labs, which had developed the transistor 14 years earlier. He says scientists there were able to analyze and later recreate the alien microchip.
What would happen if something like that were to occur? Well, what would happen is, in a very short time, the world would be transformed radically.
There's no doubt that after the development of the integrated circuit in the early 1960s, the world is transformed. Electronic devices from the cell phone to the laptop computer become reality. Corso claims the Roswell microchip was supposedly damaged from the crash, but that in his possession is another alien object, this one apparently fully functioning.
He knows from reports that when people were shining this thing around, it caused burning on the surfaces that it was aimed at.
Corso says he reads classified military reports speculating that the artifact from Roswell, apparently capable of burning holes in walls, is some kind of cutting tool, perhaps used for surgery. At Hughes Aircraft, from the late 1950s into the early 1960s, researchers have been working on what would become the first laser tracking and targeting devices for military aircraft. But engineers have run into a snag in their efforts to create a practical device. That is, Corso asserts, until he shows them the alien cutting tool.
It did accelerate after 1960-61 because people figured out new ways to make lasers. And as the science advanced, the engineering advanced.
Corso's filing cabinet reportedly contains another treasure from the Roswell trove.
It was glass tubes. And they emitted different color lights. And those were sent to Bell Laboratories. From that was one of the greatest advancements I think we have today, came out in fiber optics.
Many UFO researchers theorized that the spacecraft had no wiring because it was fitted instead with fiber optic cable. Transmitting information with light happens to be an old technology. It dates back to one of the pioneers of the telephone, Alexander Graham Bell, who experimented with a device he called the photophone in 1880.
Most people have never heard of it, but back in his day, serious scientists thought that the photophone was a more impressive invention than the telephone. The photophone was a way that you could transmit a voice signal over a beam of light.
Corso's research tells him that data transmission via light had failed because scientists could not direct a beam of light around corners. But Corso contends that the Roswell artifacts might hold the answer.
They were looking at this glass fibers and say, wow, the light actually turns a corner. How can light go in curves? And then they concluded the reason for that was because it had a cladding wrap on it. The cladding was the key discovery you had to make in order to make fiber optics work.
Although it would not be until the 1970s that fiber optics were in general use, UFO researchers believed that the cladding wrap on the alien artifact, an outer covering on the fiber that guided the light, made it possible for earthly fiber optics to advance. Corso also says he examined some curious super strong fibers that his military reports claim come from the aliens' flight suits.
The first thing of the fabric that amazed me was a thread that I couldn't cut with a razor blade. Just a thread.
In his book, Corso offers a theory about the fibers composing the alien flight suits.
The alien bodies, probably the more vulnerable aspects, were protected from what had to be incredible energies by the super tenacity of the fabric, which somehow formed a shield. And Corso said they didn't put these on, they were woven around them. In other words, they spun them like a cocoon.
According to Corso, he wonders if these super strong fibers could be developed into super strong bulletproof shields for law enforcement and military use.
Corso said that the Army tried to bring it to the University of Colorado to try and fabricate this technology.
The mid-1960s saw great advances in super strong fabrics that used polymer technology, the type of molecules that Corso claimed were present in his alien fabric. In 1965, Kevlar was invented, a fabric that would be used in bulletproof vests. More proof, according to Corso, of the impact of alien technology. There's no denying that the period Corso works in the Pentagon coincides with a period of rapid technological growth in the United States. Corso's supporters say alien technology played a role, but others see things very differently. In his best-selling book, The Day After Roswell, Lieutenant Colonel Philip Corso claimed to introduce alien technology from the 1947 Roswell crash to the American military's technological agenda. But others say that the scientific leaps of the 1960s were not made by one hero, and not with the help of aliens.
It's nice to think in terms of one heroic person leading us into the new world of far-out technology learned from saucers. That sounds great. But having worked on a whole host of big research and development programs, that isn't the way it works. Look, on the aircraft nuclear propulsion program, we employed 3,500 people. 1,100 of them were engineers and scientists. We were spending $100 million a year. That's the kind of effort it takes to develop new technology. And that was in 1958 dollars at that.
Corso claims that the laser jumped from theory to practice after scientists examined the device found in the Roswell crash debris. But to science historians, that's science fiction.
The laser is a good example of an invention that doesn't really have a single eureka moment where somebody gets a brilliant inspiration and then they go down into their basement workshop and 15 minutes later they've hammered together a laser. The laser really began back in 1951 when a physicist from Columbia University was taking a walk in Washington.
That physicist was Charles Towns.
And I woke up early in the morning worrying about it. Why hadn't we been able to get anywhere? It was before breakfast, so I went out and walked out in the park, sat down in the park. Suddenly I said, hey, wait a minute. We can get a whole collection of molecules all in excited states with excess energy. And I wrote down the numbers to see now, could I make it oscillate?
And it took him 2 years and $50,000 in government grants before he could come up with the very first barely operable microwave laser.
The first laser device used microwaves rather than light. The light-emitting version wasn't functional until 1960, 9 years after Professor Towns jotted down his notes. As for aliens jump-starting the process,
No, aliens had nothing to do with the technology of the laser, nor do I. Unfortunately, I don't think aliens have given us any new information yet.
while the laser's development was slow and steady, the integrated circuit advanced rapidly. But the greatest progress was made by scientists well after Corso retired.
The real breakthrough happened in 1971 when a guy named Ted Hoff conceived of the idea of putting an entire microprocessor on one piece of silicon, a computer on a chip.
Basically what happens in an integrated circuit is that you are controlling the flow of electrons, or actually in some cases the absence of electrons.
Ted Hoff, known as the architect of the microprocessor, started working on integrated circuits in 1968. Hoff disputes Corso's claim that an alien chip captured from the Roswell crash made an earthly version conceivable.
If you have a crash scenario, there's presumably damage done. And that damage may make the device even harder to analyze. And even if you had the device, you'd really want a context. If you had seen this device in those days and had no context to put it in other words, what's it used for, you'd even have less chance of understanding it.
Hoff also says that to reverse engineer an integrated circuit, as Corso claimed happened in 1961, you would need a scanning electron microscope, which was not invented until 1966.
Even looking at devices today, the resolution of the devices are such that ordinary optical microscopes really don't reveal them. So you'd need something more sophisticated. I don't think at that time anybody would have been able to figure out what it was.
Philip Corso also claimed that his alien fiber optics cable inspired scientists. But science historians don't support his assertion because fiber optics required a convergence of technologies occurring over decades of development.
The idea really became interesting in 1965 when lasers were available and people suddenly realized there was a commercial use for fiber optics. So shortly after that, the project was tackled by a trio of inventors at Corning, and they came up with a successful fiber optic in 1970.
The highly directional light of a laser improved signal strength. The team of researchers at Corning Glass created a form of fused silica. This super pure glass material was capable of carrying 65,000 times more information than copper wire. This made fiber optics commercially practical, 10 years after Corso claimed to have accelerated the technology.
That's the real achievement that Don Keck and Peter Schultz and Bob Maurer came up with when they were at Corning. It was coming up with this completely unexpected way to make glass.
Corso also stated that he inspired a quantum leap in image enhancement technology. But science historians say the technology of turning night into day was also decades in the making.
Progress increased so incrementally. It goes all the way back to the 1940s when image intensifying radar scopes were issued to Allied troops in the Pacific Theater.
The first night vision gear employed thermal imaging. Developed by the Germans during World War II, it brought heat energy into the visible spectrum using an infrared light and a receiver. Then, by the early 1960s, William Spicer, a Defense Department researcher, had created image intensification technology. Fort Belvoir scientists built upon his work. Image intensification requires no additional light. Functioning like a radio receiver for light waves, it amplifies existing light. Today's image intensifiers are small enough to be worn as goggles and are capable of amplifying light by a factor of 35,000. Scientists suggest that if Corso really had an alien image enhancer, showing it to researchers in the 1960s did little to advance the technology's measured progress.
The engineering that was required just progressed at a very slow rate. Making night vision work was largely the result of really brilliant engineering.
Finally, according to technology experts, Corso's super tenacity fibers came not from alien spacesuits, but from years of research by a scientist named Stephanie Kwolek, who worked at the DuPont Company. She learned how to organize super strong chains of atoms in 1965, and by 1971, Kevlar was on the market.
The theory that something like Kevlar came off a flying saucer strikes me as being insulting to someone like Stephanie Kwolek, who poured enormous amounts of effort, years of her life, tremendous dedication and brain power went into cracking the secrets of nature.
Furthermore, some skeptics insist Lieutenant Colonel Corso simply didn't have the technical background to run a reverse engineering program.
I read something he'd written years ago and found that it was not high-tech. I worked for General Electric, Westinghouse, General Motors, TRW Systems, McDonnell Douglas, with lots of technical people. I'm a physicist myself. And I saw nothing in what Corso had written that gave any indication of his having the knowledge, the skills, the talent, the background to handle stuff like this and get it into industry.
Corso had an answer to this objection, claiming that his team of A-list scientists helped him interpret the Roswell cache.
I didn't have the training or the background for something. You know, that got highly technical. But fortunately, the German scientists were there. I knew von Braun, and I knew Hermann Obert. Obert was a man who said we've been helped. But we had to keep it quiet to protect our budget, to protect our organization.
For doubters, there is also the issue of Corso's rank. A lieutenant colonel, some argue, wouldn't be running things as Corso claimed he was.
I think an indication of his value to the military would have been given by the fact that he was not a full colonel, despite all his years in service.
But others stand by Corso's assertions, particularly those who say they're familiar with the way the U.S. military functions.
back in those days, you know, a lieutenant colonel had a lot more authority and position than a lieutenant colonel today has. And even today, you've got lieutenant colonels doing quite a bit of the important tactical and even strategic planning and operation.
The History Channel contacted the military contractors Corso claims to have worked with, and all say there was no alien involvement in the technologies Corso says he jump-started. No memos, directives, or paperwork of any kind exist to directly support Corso's assertions about reverse engineering alien technology. But Corso's supporters say there is no paper trail for a very good reason. Among those who believe there was an alien crash near Roswell, there is consensus on one concept. The U.S. government systematically suppressed the truth.
The government of the United States and other governments around the world have gone out of their way to keep that wrapped up inside a riddle that's smothered by an enigma.
Philip Corso says he also had to keep his reverse engineering program under wraps.
We couldn't discuss it. We made a decision. It cannot be discussed outside of us. We're doing good. We have the authority, we have the money for our R&D projects. Well, that's fine. Let's keep it that way. Let's not get mixed up in the murky area of whether they exist or not.
As for Corso's contributions to the advancement of science, skeptics say that the technology he claimed to have pushed forward was ready to emerge anyway. As proof, they offer up the mind control headband, one alien technology that Corso did not claim to develop. Today, it's well on its way to becoming a reality without his help. Since the 1970s, scientists have been experimenting with using EEG readouts of brainwaves to provide feedback and change behavior. It's now possible to use EEG feedback games like this one to learn how to manage brain states. But mind control technology has advanced even further than that.
Going to open the first email, which says congrats. It says
in 2004, researchers received FDA approval to test tiny brain implants designed to allow disabled people to control computers using their thoughts.
Next, I'm going to paint a circle.
UFO researchers say the government's supposed cover-up may forever obscure the facts of Roswell, and therefore also obscure the truth about whether alien technology played a supporting role in the development of fiber optics, super-strong fabrics, lasers, integrated circuits, or battle-ready image enhancement.
Some people think that, for example, aliens intervened in 3500 BC in Egypt to help the Egyptians build pyramids. You know, well, doggone it, the Egyptians of 3500 BC were fully capable of putting big blocks on top of other big blocks, right? If the Egyptians had suddenly developed cell phones or something like that, then I would say, okay, there's intervention there. But that's not what they did.
But while Lieutenant Colonel Philip Corso might be questioned, his ideas deemed controversial, and his predictions dismissed as the stuff of science fiction, his impact on UFO legend and lore can never be minimized.
The military, the Pentagon, the government of the United States does not give that type of authority to a loose cannon. This man was highly regarded, highly respected.
At my age, what do I have to lose? I have to let my grandchildren and my children know this, because how long will I be around yet? And when I go, it goes with me.
There must have been many days that Philip Corso said to himself, why me? Why do I have this information? And again, I think that's one of the things that probably plagued him for so many years. It's pretty difficult to keep a secret like that within yourself.
Even today, Only 10% of the story is told, my father says. The rest is classified.
Oh my God, I know that's a plane. Oh Jesus, please be a plane.
What the hell was that? Midway across the perfectly circular disc.
In our history, the first time we're studying something that's studying us.
Another plane, something fired a beam of light during a circle, you can imagine, circling our warhead. Fired another warhead.